Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Goodness, it's too hot. It's very nice to have you all here today to join us on this webinar about live events. My name is Jake O'Neill. I'm the head of marketing at Vuelio. I'm delighted to be joined today by two wonderful guests. We did have a third on the billing. Unfortunately, Michael is unable to join us due to a real-life crisis communications situation that's arisen with the Rugby League World Cup and Australia and New Zealand pulling out. So Michael, his phone is in meltdown and he's taken priority in meetings rather than join us, but we will catch up with Michael afterwards to share some more content from him. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Barbara and Hannah. Barbara, could you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at Cheltenham Festivals?
I'm Bairbre Lloyd. I'm the PR and Communications Manager at Cheltenham Festivals. And we produce 4 festivals each year from May to October, which are our jazz, science, music and literature festivals. So that's about 36 days of festivals and about 1,000 events per year. We also have a year-round community and education programme, and we work with around 30,000 pupils from over 200 schools. So I look after the overall PR, but I work with 3 PR agencies who look after the national press for our jazz, music and literature festivals. So I look after the local press, our corporate partners, our education work and our science festival.
Brilliant, just a tiny remit then you've got to cover. Thank you. And Hannah, over to you.
Hi, I am Hannah Mursal. I own Mercer Entertainment Travel, and we look after festivals and concerts and tours worldwide. Logistically, we do all the travel. If it's in the UK, US, wherever, Australia, we move the band from A to B on tour, or if they're going to a festival, we make sure that the artist, the band and the crew all get there safely.
So I'm going to go straight into, and obviously this is a Q&A, so anyone who's with us today, please do feel free to ask questions in the chat or the Q&A. I've got a few questions of my own. And Hannah, I'm going to start with the last 18 months. What's that been like for you, managing so many disparate schedules across so many territories around the world?
It's been tricky. I mean, in the UK and across Europe, it's been quite quiet. No one's done anything. It's more been done people doing music videos or having to find locations so they could do virtual performances and things like that. In the US, it's been more domestic travel. They haven't really stopped. I think they stopped for maybe about 3 months. But in the US, they were still traveling to do gigs, still traveling to small festivals and things like that. But we're looking at the bulk of it coming back from September, which is where all the festivals and the concerts have been scheduled to. But it's just been a waiting game on tenterhooks, sort of booking tours in, because that's when they get the venue dates. And then as things have been pushed back, then trying to find new venue dates to push the tours back into. So,
of course, and I imagine just, you know, in different places around the world with different restrictions changing constantly. Has that been a real challenge to book things and to keep plans in place?
Yeah, because they change on a daily basis. It's not just a weekly, and it all depends on who's going where. And then you've still got to look at the visas and the passports of who's traveling. You know, sort of, I've got Jamaican artists, but their crew aren't Jamaican, they're American, they're English, they're German. So for some projects, we could get half the crew there, but the others couldn't, sort of, because Jamaica was allowing in US citizens and people flying from the US. And it's the same with people going to the US. We've had people fly into Costa Rica for 2 weeks because they're allowed to with British passports. And then after that, they can go into the US because you had to be out of Europe for 2 weeks before you could get into the US. So it's been tricky, because you have to know what every single country's point is at and who they're allowing in, and is it forms, is it vaccinations? Is it what kind of test is it that they need to get in? So it's every single person traveling, it's been looking up what the rules and regulations are at that time. So you can't really book in advance either.
Yeah, just got to constantly be on I guess the front foot with being proactive in making sure you're aware of the different rules, different regulations, and how that applies to what you need to do in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of, you can't book them today to fly next week because it'll change maybe midweek, and then they can't fly. So it's been making these bookings in a short amount of time as well. So,
and Barbara, to go from, I guess, all countries around the world to actually a very specific location in the UK, but I imagine with also guests coming from all sorts of places and needing to be managed as well. And obviously the UK guidelines do keep changing on a regular basis as well. So how was the last 18 months look for you and planning, I guess, a series of events across the year?
The last 18 months, we've just, like Hannah was referring to, it's just constantly juggling all of those different priorities. And I think when you're a location and you're putting on a festival, you can make your own decision about how you can manage it. But then actually, if you want people to come, there's that whole, you've got to think about them as well. And so some of our speakers were delighted to get out of wherever they were and come to Cheltenham, which they love doing, and others were not so keen. But actually what it has opened up to us is the idea of people dialing in. We've all got used to Zoom calls like this.
Yeah.
And actually, when we did our literature festival, which was a hybrid in the sense that we had a physical audience, a socially distanced physical audience, and then we had we streamed it online, so you could come in person, buy a ticket and sit in the hall, or you could watch at home. And what we found was that we could actually dial in the speakers as well. So there were people on stage, and then some of the guests from the United States were able to join in online. And that will have repercussions into the future. So when lockdown finally lifts, that is another string to our bow, and we're going to be using that this October as well for the literature festival. But obviously for music events that doesn't work. You can't dial in a music performance. But for the science festival and for the literature festival, that worked for us. It's not the same, but I think if you have got a live event happening and then you've got somebody on a big screen taking part in the live discussion, it worked really, really well. But I think just looking back at the 18 months, I think from our point of view, we were like a lot of cultural organizations like theatres and orchestras, and there was a huge appetite for us to do something and to provide some support for the community. And if you remember when we were in lockdown and people were homeschooling, what we found was that our science festival was an absolute godsend to lots of parents. So they were able to sit the kids down and watch an hour's show and learn something and do a bit of homeschooling. So it was kind of like a whole chunk of morning. So we found that our digital audience has increased enormously, and that's something that we want to develop and try and keep hold of as well. So although it's been very difficult, it has it's made us really jump forward in terms of our digital ambitions. It's absolutely kick-started that, and it's really pushed us forward in a way that it would probably have taken us 4 or 5 years to reach, but we had to do it in about 5 weeks.
I guess that's one of the it's hard to say silver lining, but one of the better points of the pandemic is actually the need for innovation has just pushed everything into development and progress. We've had a question here from Poppy, and I think I probably know the answer to this, but are you planning on continuing to run hybrid events or is the focus going to be 100% in person again?
We are planning to run hybrid events. We're still sorting out for the literature festival, but there will be a digital element of it. Not sure if it will be live streamed or whether it will be highlights, but there will certainly be a digital element going forward. Yeah.
Fantastic. And in terms of like communication from the very beginning, looking back, is there anything you'd do differently now if it all started again, like with everything you know and how it went in terms of communicating, I guess, not only to the audiences, but also to, you know, the partners and people taking part in the festivals?
I think it's a hard one, isn't it, with hindsight? I think you just have to go with what you know. I mean, we were making decisions very late. The senior management team wanted to keep that decision making as late as possible in order to have maximum flexibility. And so we were on tenterhooks, just waiting for the go ahead or the not go ahead. And I think that caused quite a lot of sailing close to the wind, because we were bringing in lots of innovation with new websites and new technology, and there wasn't really enough time to test it. So it was fine, but we could have done with a bit more user experience testing.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess that's something you now have for next time.
Yeah, but it was hairy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And Hannah, in
terms of yeah, Hannah, in terms of your clients, and also I guess, you know, the suppliers further along the chain when you're organising these things, the communications from them, were there good examples and bad examples? Is there things that perhaps you do differently for your clients?
I think we were all in it together with my lot, sort of, because I look after them 24/7 while they're on the road. We then become sort of a family. So I know the ins and outs of how their mum's doing, how their dad's doing, you know, things like that. So in the beginning, it was panic stations and none of us knew what was going to happen. Everyone was guessing the outcome. So it was great to keep that communication. In terms of suppliers, I mean, a lot of my hotel suppliers, in terms of entertainment travel, the entertainment reps were the first ones to lose their jobs, because that was the last niche that was going to come back. You know, corporate probably come back first, or leisure, or things like that. But my contacts all sort of got made redundant, and then they went and started their own projects where they became representative companies. And so it was keeping in the loop of what everyone was doing. Also, because I work in an industry where if the artist wakes up one morning and decides they don't want to be an artist anymore, you've just lost the client. So it was keeping up with what the artist is doing, what they're working on, what projects. I mean, I had one who's also an actor, so the production started and was still going majority of the time. I think they only stopped for 3 months, and he was acting the whole time. It's good to know that some of them were in the studio, because then that tells me that when we come back, they've got an album that they need to tour. So that's going to be at least a European and the UK tour. So it was also just keeping in mind of what will happen and when. And they were the first ones to know that when concerts were rebooked or when festivals were rebooked. I mean, I had one artist that was booked for festivals in Portugal, and because it's been rescheduled so many times, he just completely pulled out. So it was keeping in touch with them and building those relationships also got me little snippets of information of when are we going back to work. One of them did say it's not going to be until this October, and he said that last March. He was like, sit back, you've got a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So and so he called it, and I was like, we're just booking now for him this October.
Can we get him into this webinar? Sounds like he knows what's going to happen.
He knows. That's it. I always call him and go, what have you heard? What's on the grapevine? So, but yeah.
In terms of your contacts, like were those like you say, those job roles were perhaps first to be made redundant or go on furlough, are there still gaps in the industry that you're now facing, or like as things go back to normal, are there still gaps that where those contacts once were that you don't have them anymore?
Yeah, I mean, you've got entertainment-friendly hotels that have shut down completely. Sort of one of our main hotels was sort of the Ace Hotel in London, which was very entertainment-friendly, and it shut down. It shut down about 6 months into the pandemic. It's now reopening as something else, but you need to know whose hotel it is to have that contact to then book it. And just, yeah, a lot of people I know in terms of suppliers haven't gone back to work because entertainment still hasn't picked up, even though we're allowed out to nightclubs and festivals and things. It still had an impact on the hospitality world, where hotels don't see that influx of entertainment travel, because if you think majority of artists are sort of London based, and you need the hotels for the international artists that are coming in to the country, and that's not happening yet. So maybe September we'll see it, but yeah, there's still gaps, especially entertainment gaps.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's just incredibly stressful to try and fit those pieces of the puzzle together when there's just pieces missing all the time.
Before it used to be just picking up the phone and saying someone said, Hannah, put me a hotel wherever, and you'd know which the entertainment hotel was. You'd have the contact in your phone and you'd just ring them and it would be booked within seconds. Whereas now you have to ring front desk. Front desk's usually changed, to then find out who the salesperson is, to then book it, to get an entertainment rate. It's just, everything takes 10 times longer at the minute. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot. And Barbara, your next event is the Literature Festival. That's right, isn't it? In October.
That's right.
Do you have like contingencies in place? Like, do you have plans around the plans, I guess, for that event?
Yes, I mean, we're planning for full capacity in October without social distancing, and we made that call quite early on and said that was what we're going to do. I think if things change, we will go back to what we've done. But we've been through this now. This will be the 8th festival that we've done in lockdown. So that would involve us reviewing the seating capacities, and we'd bring in social distancing, and we'd bring in all our COVID secure measures. So it would be a big upheaval. We'd probably have to rethink we wouldn't be able to run all of the nearly 500 events in the festival. That just wouldn't be able to happen. We probably wouldn't be able to build our festival village, but we'd do it in some form. But I don't know. So our senior management team are probably in HQ cooking up all of those plans as we speak. But yes, we will have contingencies in place. But let's just, we're just hoping against hope that it will be all fine in October and we can go on. We were lucky last year. We managed to slip in between lockdowns. We just hit the sweet spot.
Of course, nice.
And I think we were the first literature festival to do that hybrid version. And we just hope again that we can do it again.
Definitely. And I guess one of the key skills then for you, having to be so reactive either to, like you say, the management of the event or government policy or anything else, is just this idea of flexibility, kind of constant flexibility.
Yes, exactly. And we've got it, I wouldn't want to sound complacent, but I've done so many cancellation announcements and rejigging announcements that we have our plan, and I don't think it causes us that much. I think if you've got a cancellation plan written and ready to go, you just roll it out. It's just a matter of you know that it works, and then you'll roll it out again. So it's all just having those comms ready to run, I think, is the key for me.
Which is the new thing that you have to have ready now, is the cancellation comms that you have to, like before it was just a small piece that you had to have ready if or maybe, but now it's something that's huge when you're planning.
And I guess you can put those plans in place kind of forevermore now. You'll always have this wealth of experience of if this needs to happen, we can fall back on it.
Yes, exactly. We've got we've got comms plans in place, and I think people are still going to be a little bit insecure. I think one of the things that we were really conscious about in terms of our audience was that some people were absolutely gung-ho and really ready to come out, and there's some people who are a little bit dismissive of lockdown and masks and security measures, and you've got to be prepared for those people as well as the really cautious people. And so I think you have to explain really clearly to everybody how you are managing it. So we had a comms plan in place very early on to inform the audience of what they could expect. And I think if the audience knows what to expect, they know that they're going to be asked to wear a face mask, and they know that they will be able to, they've got to sit in bubbles, and they're going to be asked to, wash their hands, and they're not going to have physical tickets. They're going to have e-tickets instead of physical tickets. As long as you explain all those things really clearly, I think people will accept it. It's the not knowing that makes people angry. But we had really positive feedback. People said that they felt safe. They could see the measures that we had put in place. And in fact, one of the early things we did, we were very lucky to have a camera crew who was doing a kind of daily highlights. And one of the first things we did on day one, it was about lunchtime, was put out, this is what a COVID secure festival looks like. And we showed people, we showed the seats, we showed the distancing, we showed the masks, and the hand washing and that kind of thing. And that went out on social media. And it just, everybody kind of like almost their shoulders relaxed. They said, oh, right, okay, I can see now. I can see what I'm coming to experience, and that looks really safe. And people said they felt really safe. And that, that gave us a lot of confidence then to, to do it again. We know we can do it again, and we know we can keep people safe. And it's good to have that confidence, I think.
Excellent. We've had a couple of questions coming through, so I'd rather divert to them than keep asking my own. I'm going to ask both of you this. Hannah, I'll start with you. What channel do you find most effective at communicating any changes to the event, to the plans? You said about picking up the phone. Are people still wanting to pick up the phone, or are they now trying to have video calls or Zoom chats with you?
Everyone's having video calls. Everyone's having video calls and Zoom chats, and seeing who, so what's going on, and just actually seeing people's faces. In terms of the cancellations of the concerts and things like, and moving dates, it's all been through online. It's all been social media or online, or the artists themselves have got on and said, look, it's been pushed back for obvious reasons, things like that. So it's just been social media, which for the audience that goes to concerts and festivals, and that's where you'll find them, and that's the best way of getting the information out. Communicating what the new dates are, it's all been on their websites or Instagram.
Kind of had the audience coming to you, so you can change that central location of news and information, and the audience will find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that the same for you, Barbara, with the Cheltenham festivals?
Yeah, very much so. Social media is it is very immediate, but also we sent emails to bookers. So if people had booked a ticket, then they would always get an email to tell them about any changes. But social media and website, is the main way of doing that.
Fantastic. We've had a question here from Natalie. Barbara, I think this is probably about Cheltenham festivals, because you said you're going full capacity. Are you expecting the same number of people as before COVID?
We are hoping for the same number of people as before COVID. We're just going to have to put it out there and see.
Just one of those things. I guess this would be the first real time since the beginning of the pandemic when you'll get a sense of that.
That's right. So yes, we're going for full capacity, and I think we weren't anticipating this setback. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it. But at the moment, we're going for full capacity. Yeah.
Wonderful. We're nearly at the end of time. Can you believe it? I'm just going to ask for some practical tips now. Hannah, if we start with you, whether it's small scale events or big, I know you handle all sorts of size events, but what advice would you have for people managing events at the moment and in the next few months? Like, what would you, when you're planning and booking, what advice would you have for them?
Is be prepared. It's that contingency plan of be prepared if the rug may be pulled under you at any moment. It may be, you know, the night before or the week before. Just be prepared. Insurance has been huge in my world of insurance doesn't cover COVID. It's quite hard to get event insurance that covers COVID. However, make sure that you know your cancellations and your insurance with your suppliers, that you're covered. In terms of, yes, they may be a cancellation. However, there's also a separate cancellation if it's due to COVID. So that would be my practical tip. Excellent.
And with the insurance, was that always the case? Was COVID like never covered, or is it something new that they now no longer cover?
It was never something that was on a policy, really. It could at the beginning. It was sort of classed as a natural. What do you call it? Something natural that happens that is out of your control.
Yeah.
However, now it's not, because we've known about it for a year and a half. So now it's not covered. So, and I think a lot of insurance companies got caught out the first time, and then they had to pay out thousands for interruption insurance. But yeah, now you can't get it. You're not covered at all.
Perfect sense, and a great practical piece of advice, I think, for anyone. Barbara, over to you.
I think I would just reiterate what I said, just have your comms plan ready in advance. Just make sure that what we did was we went through looking at scenarios and what potential negative reactions we might have from audiences about safety on site. That was the main thing. We didn't want people to come back and say, you know, you behaved irresponsibly by going ahead with the festival. So we thought about all the things that they might pick up on and made sure that we had mitigating facts in place, and made sure that we had, you know, we're really proactive about the safety measures that we were doing. And then also, if you are having to send out comms with changes, just make sure that you've got all your stakeholders informed at the right times. So we wouldn't want our artists knowing from the press that the festival was cancelled. We wanted to make sure that artists knew first that things were being postponed. Similarly with staff and volunteers and suppliers, and so it's just have that kind of tree of comms and make sure that, you know, all of the people are informed first before you move on to the next section.
Brilliant, wonderful advice, both of you. Yeah, unbelievably, we've reached the end of the time. I want to thank you both so much for joining us and providing your insight and experience. It's been incredibly useful, I know, for our audience and everyone who will watch the recording afterwards. So thank you both very much. And to all our audience for joining us today, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next time. Say goodbye for now, though.